Welcome to Pistons Jack Weekly, where I'll be recapping all the latest news and results for your Detroit Pistons using the 3-1-3 formula. We'll cover 3 likes, 1 dislike, and 3 things to keep an eye on with the Detroit Pistons. But first, let's just do a general vibe check. We are now kind of through the first week of the NBA season, although it's kind of really like 4 days. But I want to say we're through the first week of NBA basketball for the 24-25 season, and the Pistons sit at 0-3. Now, I've got plenty of talking points to get through here. So we're going to cover a heap in the next 20 minutes or so. But I think vibes-wise, I'm recording this. It is Monday where I am in Australia. So we're now 24 hours removed from the Boston Celtics loss. And I think from where I was after the Cavs loss on the Friday night, I think I'm in a much better place. And I think now with, like I said, 24 hours to reflect upon the Pistons' most recent loss, but overall their 0-3 start, I think I am feeling pretty encouraged by this team. Clearly, we want to win. We 0-3. This team being winless after what we've experienced the past 2 seasons hasn't got fans feeling great, and I get that. But I think if you've tuned in and watched all 3 games, start to finish, there's a sense that this team is different to last season, and it's not just because of the veterans. I think it's because of player development for some guys who seem to be continuing on an upward trajectory, and one of which I think's taken a real leap offensively. But JB Bickerstaff, there's a sense of just real organization with this team. And look, I feel like I've said this a million times, but that should be a baseline for an NBA coach. But there's buy-in and organization with this team on the court. It's early. It hasn't translated to wins, but it just feels like this team is going to be in any game they bring the effort for. And I think that was my biggest takeaway from the Celtics game, biggest takeaway from the Pacers game, and I think even in that Cavs game, whilst that was the worst of the 3, they got it to within 4 towards the end of the third quarter on the road against a really good Cavs team. So, I think they're going to be in any game they want to be in. And I say that because I think the thing that let them down in that Boston game is their effort in the first half. But they came all the way back, and it's easy to forget. The Pistons are on the second night of a back-to-back. Celtics weren't. The Celtics are they're the best team in the league, I think. Best team in the East. They decimated New York opening night. And so I think fans should be, whilst I understand the disappointment of an 0-3 start, I think overall the vibes should be at a decent level. I don't think you should be checking out in the season. I don't think this is the same team as last year. I don't think we're going to experience anything close to what we experienced last year. But I really think the next week and a half, it's still going to be tough going with the schedule, which we'll talk about towards the end of today's episode. But I think you should hang in there and really just give this team. I would just say to anyone who's a casual fan and isn't going to lock in for 82, I would just give this team till the end of November. I really would. I think in a month's time, we'll be sitting here and we're going to have some real exciting things to talk about with this team. Maybe not playoffs, but I just think they're going to have time to mesh, and there's probably going to be some changes we didn't expect. But I think overall, from what we've seen, I think if you give it till the end of November, you're going to have a lot of fun with this team. So I think now we'll get into our 3-1-3 talking points, and just to reiterate that I'm going to go through 3 things I liked, 1 dislike, and 3 things to keep an eye on for the upcoming week of hoops. My first like is a bit of an easy one here. I think a lot of us will be in agreement here, but the biggest thing that stood out to me so far is probably just Cade Cunningham establishing himself as a legit all-star candidate for this season. Through 3 games, he's averaging 27 points, 5 rebounds, 8 assists, I think 1.5 blocks, 48% shooting from the field, 30% from 3, but compared to prior seasons, I'm not worried about the 3-point shot anymore. with him. So I think that will come back up. But I think the way he's played and some of these quarters he's put together where, particularly in third quarters, he's really taken over. I think you are seeing, like Cade, I think he's only 22, 23 years old, but I think you are getting a glimpse of kind of what peak Cade Cunningham is. And I think no matter what, whether you're a believer in him being the franchise player of this team or not, I think it's extremely clear that you're not. I don't think you're trading this guy. Like I think he is an absolute cornerstone. Maybe he's not your number one guy in a championship team, but from what I've seen so far and his ability to take over games in the mid range, his passing, his playmaking, we'll talk about the turnovers in a sec. But um, I think it's just been so encouraging to see him come out like this to start the season, especially after a bit of a slow start in the preseason, and then a slow first half against the Pacers. Like, I feel like he's really asserted himself. And my biggest takeaway from his first three games is the numbers are great, but if you look at that second half against Boston, that might be my favorite Cade Cunningham. Now, and it's because of the defense he played. He, in that game against Boston, so the Pistons were down by 23 in the first half, and they got it back to like 10 by halftime or 12. But that third quarter, Cade Cunningham came out, and not only was he doing his usual thing, getting buckets in the third, I think he had like 8 points, but I'm pretty sure he had 2 blocks, 1 steal. And when he was matched up with Jaylen Brown or Jason Tatum, this stats for the whole game, they shot 2 of 12 from the field. So when he's playing defense like that and setting the tone, I truly think like that brings his team to another level. And it, like just even for this season, like we'll talk about something in the next segment that's bothered me, but I think this team's really missing a defensive anchor, obviously, particularly in the starting lineup. And obviously you would like that to come from your center position, but it's feeling like that might not be on this roster anytime soon. And I think for Cade to come out and set the tone defensively in that third quarter against the league's best team and two of the best wings, I think if he gives, like, I know a lot of fans want Cade potentially to be this guy who averages 28 to 30 points and like 7 and 7, like, but and be like this heliocentric offensive type guy, because if he leans to be like that Luka heliocentric, like I just think the amount of usage you have offensively, I don't think you can give it all defensively. And I think he's still going to handle the ball a heap no matter what. But the version of Cade that gives you a stat line, like he did against the Celtics, of 21 points, I think 6 rebounds, 10 assists, and then a combined like 5 stocks. And on top of that, though, behind the stats, he's actually playing real defense and locking guys up and creating havoc. Like, I think that is the best version of Cade. We saw it for bits and pieces when he was a rookie, like, but I feel like the version of Cade that is actually locked in defensively, I think that's the best version. Like, because he's 6'6", 7 foot wingspan. Like, he's got all the tools. Like, he really does. I know he's not the most explosive athlete, but sometimes I don't think you need that defensively to stay in front of your man and really just, disrupt and make the best players really earn their points. Like, he's got the strength now, and whilst he's probably never going to have the energy to be a lockdown defender for 3 or 4 quarters, watching him do what he did against Boston in that second half, like that, I think that's my favorite version of Cade. He led on both sides of the court. He set the tone defensively, and everyone followed. Like, you even had Jaylen Durand in there getting steals, getting blocks. Like, it turned the game. And it's not just all Cade. I don't want to just sound like I'm praising Cade for everything, because he's got his turnover woes, but I just felt like against the league's best team, some might say he didn't really score that much in the fourth and can't close games. And I think he's got to prove that, but I thought his defensive shift in that second half really helped this team and motivated them. So the turnovers, as I mentioned, he's had 16 in the past 2 games. I think he had 3 or 4 in the first game as well against the Pacers. Not good enough. He would know that. something that he struggled with at the start of last season. Some of them, and like, I honestly didn't know he had 7 against Boston. I didn't feel them as much. He had a couple of bad ones in the first half, but the Cavs game was really bad. 9 turnovers was bad, but 6 of those are in the first half. And I think whilst they're bad, he's a high usage guy, and I'm not excusing him here, but he's a high usage guy. And I think even with the turnovers, the Pistons have still been in every game to win it. Like, they really have. And I don't think, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think he's had a crucial turnover in the last 3 or 4 minutes of these games. So, not good enough. They need to be much lower. But I also think to just be like, nah, excuse all the rest. I don't care about the numbers if he's turning it over. I think that's too harsh. But Cade's my number 1. Now we're going to move on here. I've got 2 more likes that have stood out to me. And the second one is Cade Cunningham's running mate, Jaden Ivey. Now, I think what I've got here is Jaden Ivey's offensive improvement transitioning from the preseason into the real thing. And I think what we saw in preseason, it was hard not to be excited, but it was also like, okay, it's preseason. Like, he was shooting like 65% on pull-ups, like 60% from 3. Like, he was shooting ungodly numbers that just no one can keep up for a season. But after a bit of a shaky first game where he didn't hit a 3, he's now averaging on the season 22 points, 5 rebounds, 4.5 assists, and only 1.3 turnover. And he's shooting just under 50% from the field and 33% from 3. And I have here noted that he's shot 40% from 3 in the past 2. So I think in the first game he might have been like 0 of 6 or something, and then the past 2 he's shot a combined 4 of 10. So good to see that trending in the right way. He's hit a couple of mid-range shots, but besides the shooting as well, just the way he's attacking the rim on drives. Like, I'm going to drop some highlights on Twitter and Instagram in the next day or 2, but just look at some of these drives. Like, I always thought initially, like, before I actually had watched a heap of Jaden Ivey, I thought he had a heap of vertical explosion, but I think as a rookie and last season, a lot of his explosion has normally just been like horizontal with his speed. He's not a guy that, for as athletic and strong as he is, he's not a guy that gets a lot of poster dunks or, dunks a lot at the rim or as much as you would think. But I think what you're seeing this season is him figuring out, A, how to use his speed with an improved handle, but B, I just think he's finishing around the rim. Like, I'm not sure the percentages, but some of the finishes he's having with his left and right hand, I've been so impressed. And because, like, he might not be able to have that peak athletic explosion like Westbrook and Rose where they can just get up and dunk on anyone, but he's got the speed they have. And seeing him utilize that now on drives with better footwork and, like I said, better handle, it's really exciting. That game against Boston, he led the team in scoring, and he's shot over 50%. Like, he got to the line. Like, he's getting to the free throw line as well, like 5 or 6 a game, maybe more. So, I mean, offensively, I think he is taking a leap. And we need to see it for more, because he's had hot streaks in the past where he's averaged 20 odd points on good efficiency. But I will say, those hot streaks in the past were normally just heavily reliant on the 3-point shot. This isn't. Like, he's not shooting. Like, I think the 3-point shot is improved, but if you just look at the raw numbers, this 22 points on 50% shooting from the field isn't coming from the 3-point line. It's coming from free throws and finishing better at the rim. And that is the version of Jaden Ivey that once that 3 ball catches up in the next week or 2, like, that's the version of Jaden Ivey that I think could be the leading scorer on this team. Now, I'm not saying that's going to happen, but there's going to be plenty of nights where if he does round out that offensive game, like I mentioned, where he does lead the team in scoring. So, and I think that's a good thing for Detroit, to have 2 guys who can give you 25 on any given night, and Cade or Ivey. Like, what more do you really need? Like, obviously they need another third player to join those 2 in terms of who you're going to fully build around, but getting that from your backcourt is phenomenal. So the foul trouble's been an issue for him in 2 of the 3 games, the Pacers game, he was actually playing, I thought, decent in the first half, but he only played like 12 minutes because of some silly fouls. So hopefully that's not a trend and it's just more of a blimp, because I haven't really thought he's been a foul trouble guy before like Cade. So yeah, Jaden Ivey proving to be that second blue chip prospect for this team to build around, but much more to play out, but really, really exciting start for him. Not just the preseason, but the start of the regular season's been really good too. Uh, Final thing I want to touch on here is just the final like is Malik Beasley's instant offense. He's averaging 15 points, 50% shooting from three, just under 7 attempts a night. I've loved the way he's played. In the Pacers game and the Celtics game, he's come this close to being a match winner for the team in terms of an X factor. He's doesn't hesitate at all. He's confident. He's hitting some shots off the dribble even, like in the mid-range. But the spacing he provides and just his willingness to shoot as soon as he gets it is invaluable. Like, it's so refreshing. Excellent signing by Trajan Langdon. I think Beasley's on a 1 year, $6 million deal. Like, obviously these numbers might go down a little bit, but just I love the aggressiveness. I love the emotion he plays with. It feels like last season, the Pistons didn't really have that sort of vibe. Like Beasley's, I think I can see how in certain scenarios he could rub teams the wrong way or fans of teams the wrong way, but I think he's perfect for Detroit. I think that he brings just life to this team and energy and talks. So really impressed with him. I don't have much more to add. I just wanted to shout him out because I think he's been key in getting Detroit, keeping them alive in some of these games and giving them the lead in many of them. So Beasley is my third like for the week. So let me know your likes from the past week of Pistons Hoops in the comments below. Moving on now to some of the more negative things. I like to start on positives, but next up we have my biggest dislike so far of the season. And there's a couple of things here, but I think the one that stood out to me the most and the one that I didn't expect to be having this conversation, at least this early in the season, is Detroit's lack of productivity from the big man rotation. So mainly here I'm talking about Jaylen Durand and Isaiah Stewart, and kind of just the disappointment I have so far, and for different reasons for each. But I think I'll start with Jaylen Durand because he's the starter. He's the guy for me this season that, I think him and Ivy this season of the young core were the ones that had the most to prove. And they didn't get an extension offered. Oh, no, how does it work? No, they're extension eligible this summer, my mistake. But basically, there's a lot to play for this season for them. And now with a new GM who didn't draft them, a new front office who aren't as invested in them, it's really time for them to prove that they can fit with Cade and help win games. So I've spoken about Ivy, but Jaylen Durand, I think so far has been the most disappointing Piston for me. And, I've got some numbers here. The box score numbers actually look pretty good. 11 points, 10 rebounds, 4 assists, 1 block, 28 minutes. But as always for Jaylen Durand, it's not about the box score. When you're gifted and have the physical tools he has, I think those numbers, I like the passing. I think that's his X factor with the type of player he is. But the double-double, it doesn't move anyone. It's expected. And he has the worst net rating on the team of anyone who's featured in the rotation. He's currently, with Jaylen Durand on the floor, the Pistons are a minus 13.6 points per 100 possessions. Just to reiterate, that's the worst. Most of the starters range between like 7 and 11 negative net rating, but Durand is the worst. And I think the disappointing thing is he's had little patches here and there where it's looked okay, but that Boston game, man, he got carved up. The Pacers game, Miles Turner carved him up, hitting 4 threes in the third quarter. like I said, in that Celtics game, I think Al Horford had 5 threes at the halftime. So he's struggling to defend those spacing bigs on the perimeter. And then against Cleveland, Jarrett Allen and Evan Mobley, whilst whilst those two are both better than Durant, I just feel like Jaylen didn't bring it that night either. And the Pistons got dominated. So um, it doesn't get any easier. He plays Bam Adebayo and the Miami Heat next. Karl Anthony Towns this week. We're going to go through the schedule, but he needs to really start to bring it, because part of me feels like the only reason he's still starting is because Isaiah Stewart is kind of struggling equally just on the other end of the floor. But yeah, JD's really got to pick it up. He's got to figure it out, because right now, like I mentioned, he's got the worst net rating on the floor. And I know there's more than, like, that number is a combination of a lot of things, but I feel like it's accurate. If you've watched him, you just haven't felt like there's been any improvement so far. So, like I mentioned, we're going to go to Isaiah Stewart now. But if I was JB Bickerstaff, like, it's very early in the season to maybe go changing starting lineups, but he said himself the starting group's going to be flexible. So, if Isaiah Stewart, who we'll talk about now, can get it going offensively at all, because that's been Stu's biggest deficiency so far. Like, but if Stu can get it going offensively at all, like, I mean, I think there's a conversation to be had that he could be starting over Durant. But unfortunately, Stu himself has only scored 8 points in 3 games. I think he scored 6 of those against the Celtics yesterday. 0 of 1 from 3, doesn't even look to be attempting them. I'm not sure if that's a directive from the coaching staff, but very strange to only have taken 1 3 in 3 games for a guy that shot it the way he did last year. I think for Stu to have his full value as this one of the best backup big in the league, he needs to be shooting threes, pick and pop, and just not seeing that. The encouraging thing with Stu is he actually has the best net rating on the Pistons, and it's because his defense has been exceptional. The thing is, he's only playing 15 to 20 minutes a night, but he's got a plus 13.5 net rating. So, I thought he probably could have closed out the game against Boston yesterday with his defense. I thought he was key in sparking that run. I know a lot of fans are frustrated with Stu, but if you're frustrated with him, it should only be about his offense. It should have nothing to do with his defense, because this team with the center options they have is much, much better with him at the 5. It's just undeniable defensively. It's not even close. Like, just to reiterate, Isaiah Stewart is a plus 13.5 points per 100 possessions. Jaylen Durand is a negative 13.6 points per 100 possessions. That's a 26-point swing. That's insane. So, Stu's defense has been as it always is, solid. He's getting steals here and there. He's disruptive. He's rebounding as much as he can. Like, he's doing his bit defensively, but you need more than 8 points in 3 games, and you need him shooting threes and looking aggressive there, or else he becomes a bit of a non-factor offensively if all he's going to do is get the set screens and roll, because he's not the best roll man. So Pistons just need a lot more from those guys. They really do, because they're really small. They felt small through the first 3 games. Like, Stu's only 6'8", Paul Reed 6'9", Durant 6'10". Like, they need more from their bigs. So that's enough on my dislike. I'd like to know your biggest dislike, and yeah, your thoughts on the bigs overall. So let me know in the comments below. Now, to close it out here, we're going to go through 3 things to keep an eye on for the rest of the week in the Pistons' upcoming slate of games. And number 1 here, I have Tobias Harris. Now, Tobias, for me, he was close to being the biggest dislike, just because I've been quite disappointed. But I think I have moved him to more of something to keep an eye on, because part of me was thinking about the Tobias thing and his numbers and his struggles. And I think he might just need some more time. Like, I know he's a vet. I know you would expect him to come in and have more of an impact, particularly with his contract, and that's all valid. I think he's going to turn around, but part of me is maybe thinking that, and I think this is a good thing in a way. Part of me is like just wondering, is he just struggling to adjust to his role? Because I think when he signed, I think the pecking order offensively was when he signed in July, it was Cade 1. Like that's all. He's all Cade's number 1, and then I think Tobias was 2A, and I think Jaden Ivey you had potential to be 2B. Back when we were talking about this in July, and I think for a good reason, Jaden Ivey has now clearly asserted himself as the second option, and it's not close. And that's a credit to Jaden and a great thing for this team long term if it keeps up. But I think Tobias has kind of got lost in the shuffle offensively. I think he's not getting utilized probably to his strengths. Like sometimes I feel like they're kind of just chucking it to him and asking him to create, which I don't think's his game. I think you've got to get him on the move a bit more as more of a play finisher. And now that's not just talking about dunks and finishing at the rim, like just getting him coming off screens and catching it in the mid-range with his defender on the move a bit more, because Tobias isn't a guy that's going to break you down off the dribble. I think he might be just struggling with reduced touches maybe, and just, trying to figure out where his spots are with this new team, because it's easy to forget. While the Pistons didn't do a full roster overhaul, their rotation has still changed a significant amount. Like they have the 4 young guys from last year, and then they're playing 3 new veterans, Fontecchio, who only played 20 games, and Ron Holland, who's new as well. So these guys are still trying to figure it out. And I think Tobias, the reason I'm not being overly harsh this early on is because I think he's probably a guy whose role has changed even from what he thought when he signed here. So I think that's an adjustment in itself. But, I think the biggest disappointment for me is just like he had a scoreless half against the Pacers, second half, and then didn't score in the first half against the Cavs. Like you can't have that. And like some of that's on JB. Like they need to get him involved more. But most of it falls on Tobias. And the other thing with Tobias, like that I think is like the 3-point shooting just hasn't been there, but I feel like he's had in each game at least one crucial corner 3 in clutch time, and he just has bricked it. He just hasn't hit it. And I'm hoping he can turn that around, because they need him hitting threes, and they need him having the confidence to take shots in those moments as their second or third option. So those have been the disappointments for me. But like I said, I don't want to harp on it too much, because I think, I'm going to give it a few more weeks with Tobias to figure things out. But let me know your thoughts. I know a lot of fans are frustrated with him, and I can't really push back on it too much, but that's just the way I'm approaching it. The next one for me to keep an eye on is the starting lineup. So Detroit's current starting 5 is one of the worst in the league right now. They have a net rating of -11 when they have their current starting 5 on the court, which is Cade Cunningham, Jaden Ivey, Tim Hardaway Jr., Tobias Harris, and Jaylen Durand. The question for me is, 1, should Fontecchio or Beasley be inserted for Tim Hardaway Jr.? I think that's a conversation a lot of fans have had. But I think the underlying issue here and the real question could be, should Isaiah Stewart start over Jaylen Durand? Now, I know a lot of fans are going to say, well, no, Durand, like offensively, Stu can't do this. He can't roll. He's not a roll threat for Cade. And I get that this is the issue the Pistons have, is both centers have completely different strengths and completely different weaknesses in a way. But I think Jaylen Durand's lack of defensive improvement and inability to protect the paint at all is probably the biggest issue with this starting 5. Now, I get Tim Hardaway Jr., he's a vet. He's not playing better than Beasley, that's for sure, and he's not playing better than Tech, but I think you can make that change, but I'm honestly not sure how big of a difference it makes. Like, I personally, if that's going to be the first change, I think I would go with Tech and get a little bit more size at the 3. Because I really like Beasley as that 6th man. I think him coming in midway through the first quarter and just being instant offense is really helpful for this team. So I think you kind of leave him for now, and you can close games with Beasley. But I think as it relates to the starters, maybe like I would probably put Tech in for THJ. But I think the biggest issue is at the center position, and I don't think with the current roster that um, you're not going to see a whole big difference unless Durand can either pick it up or they put Stu in for Durand and Stu. But Stu, you can't like you can't start Stu right now if he's not shooting threes. I don't think you can start him because that just you completely eliminate a lot of Cade's pick and roll game. Because Stu, if he's hitting threes, he can at least pop and maybe drag the defender out or at least make them pay. But if Stu's not going to shoot threes, then I don't think you can play him heaps of minutes with Cade. I think that'll hurt Cade, but I think that's where the issue is with the starting five. So let me know your thoughts on that because I think there's some minor tweaks, but I think it's the center position that is where the biggest hole is right now. To close out the show here, guys, we're going to the last thing I thought we could cover and keep an eye on is the Pistons schedule. Now, we all knew the Pistons had a really tough first fortnight or 2 weeks in the season. They're 0-3, as I mentioned, with 3 pretty tough games against top 4 Eastern Conference teams from a season ago. Last year's champions in there as well. They now play this upcoming week. They go to Miami. So by the time you're watching this, they play in Miami tonight. Then they play in Philadelphia, in which I think is Joel Embiid's return game. They then play the Knicks at home, and then they finish the week out in Brooklyn against the Nets. So I think the biggest conversation has been there is a real chance the Pistons go 0-6 and maybe get a chance to get their first win against the Nets to close it out on Sunday, next Sunday. But for me, the game I have penciled, I think this Miami game tonight is huge. I think this is a game they should be going they should be going all out in any game, but they should be doing anything they can to get this win. I really think if you can get this win in Miami, I just think Philadelphia, the Pistons can't play there. I can't remember the last time they won in Philly. Have they beat Philly since Philly didn't have Michael Carter Williams and Sam Hinkie? I honestly don't think they've won in Philadelphia in a decade. Genuinely. Maybe they have, but I don't think they can win the Philly game. That's a game I have no expectations for. And then the Knicks game, that's an interesting one. I think ultimately they probably lose that. But for me, I think this Miami game is massive. And then I think the Nets, they have to win that on the road. You just have to. If you lose to the Nets on the road, and you've already lost to Philly and New York and maybe Miami, then we're 0-7. And then the conversations about this team not being better than last year are valid. It was going to be hard to push back on those, but I am confident quietly that they can get a win in Miami tonight. I think it's time. I think Miami's been a team they've struggled against, whether it's on the road or at home. They've had some close games, but Cade as well has probably had some of his worst games against the Heat because they just go all out on Cade and trap and make his life miserable, and then they have Bam at the rim. So I think it's time for the Pistons to just get a win over the Heat. And I think Miami this season have looked a bit up and down. So I've got a lot of stock in this game against Miami tonight. And I think I'll be this is the one of the next 3 games. I'm really hoping they can get a dub. Otherwise, I really don't want to have to wait till the Brooklyn game to get our first win. But that's the way it goes. It's a tough schedule. But look, guys, that's going to close it out for Pistons Jack Weekly. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Do you like the format of the show? I'm going to be doing this so it's out for everyone on a Monday, whether it's Monday morning for my friends in the US or Monday night for my friends in Australia. But yeah, let me know your thoughts. This is more of an extended form of my recap of the week. If you enjoyed this, anything you'd like changed, please let me know below. But yeah, as always, subscribe, appreciate all the love, and yeah, go Pistons.